Hello, church. This is Keith Fair, pastor for Faith Formation and Discipleship at St. Matthew Lutheran Church in York, Pennsylvania. We are part of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and this is the Preaching Points video for the upcoming Reformation Sunday on October 25th of 2020. This is the Sunday on which we, as Lutherans in particular, tend to lift up Martin Luther. He is a 16th century German monk, professor of the Old Testament, at Wittenberg College in Germany. He initiated a faithful dialogue originally with his colleagues and his superiors, both in the university and in the church hierarchy, sparking what we know today, 500 years later, as the Protestant Reformation. Now, it's important to note that Luther is certainly not the first reformer. He is following in the footsteps of others like John Huss and Peter Waldo and John Wycliffe, nor is he working alone. He has colleagues and contemporaries such as Philip Melanchthon and William Tyndale and John Calvin, both in Germany and in other parts of Europe. And a lot of Luther's story really has to do with being in the right place at the right time. He's encouraged along and aided by the invention of the movable type printing press from Johannes Gutenberg. He has the backing of Frederick the Wise, who is a secular authority figure in the Saxony where Luther resided. And there was also a populist movement around him and about him, and one that was too broad to ignore or to suppress. And so all of these things are the backdrop for Martin Luther's life, and a big part of the Reformation that is not exactly about him. As the story goes, on All Hallows Eve, what we call Halloween, on October 31st of 1517, Luther posted on the door of the Wittenberg Church, the All Saints Church in Wittenberg, the 95 theses, the points of discussion that he had for his arguments with the church. And that story may be more legend than truth. On this occasion of Reformation Sunday, we always read from John chapter 8, verses 31 to 36, these words. Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, "If you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." They answered him, "We are descendants of Abraham, and have never been slaves to anyone. What do you mean by saying you will be made free?" Jesus answered them, "Very truly I tell you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not have a permanent place in the household. The Son has a place there forever. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed." It's worth noting that this interaction between Jesus and the Pharisees is happening at the Festival of Sukkot, also known as the Festival of Tabernacles or Booths or Shelters, also known as the Festival of Ingathering. Now, in the Old Testament, there are a number of references to this festival with a couple of different emphases. Some of them make it about harvest time, when the workers during that last push to bring in all of the grain and produce of the harvest would save time by dwelling temporarily in the fields where the harvest was happening. And so they would put up temporary shelters, and these shelters were known as tabernacles or booths or sukkah. Sukkot is the plural. And they would stay in these shelters for that time until the harvest was complete and they could go back to their homes and their families, and there would be a celebration for this completion of the harvest. There are also references, though, to similar temporary shelters that the Israelites lived in while they were fleeing from slavery in Egypt during the Exodus. And so, in that sense, the festival commemorates the Exodus from Egypt and the dependence of Israel on the will of God. And so it's fairly ironic then that these religious leaders who are arguing with Jesus are saying, "We have never been slaves to anyone," in the midst of a festival which highlights their former slavery in Egypt, and the dependence, again, that they have, that we all have, upon God. Pastor David Lowe's observes that this Sunday, Reformation Sunday, is about freedom, but he adds this caveat: but Scripture doesn't always define freedom quite the way we do. We're used to thinking of freedom along the lines of the phrase, I am free to do whatever I want. But Scripture identifies that as just another form of bondage, being a slave to our own will, our own passions. And Scripture instead defines freedom as living the lives that God made us for, lives that are interconnected with God and with each other. And this isn't just God's purpose for us, or even a command to us. It's also the very promise and the free gift that Jesus speaks of here. This freedom is the heart of salvation, that we are free from living only for ourselves and free to live for God and for God's world and for God's people. And so that's some of what this week's scripture is going to be about as we look at this Reformation Sunday. The title of this weekend sermon is Reformed and Reforming, and we'll see where that takes us. Until then, be well and God bless.